I had a really powerful conversation with someone yesterday that I wanted to share with you. I wanted to make this video about motherhood and the mother wound, because this just feels very important and is quite complicated. So I'm just going to try and share my thoughts with you in a way that feels really clear. So firstly, all of us are the product of a mother. And the first thing I really want to highlight is that we have a myth about mothers, about what it means to be a mother. And this myth actually arises, in part anyway, from, the moment we're conceived, we desperately need nourishment and nurturing in order to survive. From the moment that you're born, if you're not soothed and touched and loved, you will die. We're born very vulnerable as humans. And so we have this innate desire for a mother being in our lives. And we have a very kind of clear definition that's already inbuilt of what that means, what that is. We're searching for it. Now, some people are very lucky and receive the mother nurturing that they desire. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But many people find that they didn't get what they needed from their mom. And this video is not about bashing mothers, because I really want to firstly speak about this mothering myth. It is a myth. It's almost impossible to achieve that amazing mother that we have in our minds. And centuries of your ancestors have struggled with being a mother. They've either felt isolated and alone, or they've had a horrendous time in childbirth, been very traumatized, or they've struggled with their relationship and juggling their relationship with also being a mother, or they've just found it exhausting and boring and painful, and maybe felt awful about the fact that they didn't naturally find that role easy. It's very, very hard to be a mother. So we've got this myth of what we want, and then we've got this reality of actually when we try to be a mother to children, it's incredibly difficult to do it well, to meet anywhere near the expectations of the child. So there are different flows of difficulty here, because if you grew up as a child looking to your mom and not receiving what you hoped for, there's a lot of guilt about that feeling. There's a lot of messaging in our society about, loving your mother. And if you didn't, or if you loved her but didn't receive the love back that you wanted, and that led to very painful emotions, that's been uncomfortable for you. I'm sure you feel guilty. Maybe you find it hard to cope with or to talk about. And if you have siblings that experienced that differently from you, it's also very invalidating. You might feel completely alone. And then similarly, if you've got your own children, maybe you've been trying desperately not to be like your own mum. Maybe that's your biggest fear, actually. And you reassure yourself by looking at all the good things that you've done for your children and trying to be a shield and saying, look, the past is the past. I'm going to do things differently. But what happens when one of your kids turns around and says, I hate you? Or when one of your kids runs into difficulty or has mental health problems, or makes choices that are hurtful to you or that you feel are unwise, the sense of loss and failure and disconnect is intensely painful. If you've been trying to right the wrongs of the mother wound that you received yourself, if you've been trying to be the perfect mum to your kids, the risk of you feeling intensely hurt by their separation from you, by their different choices, by their judgments, whether they're childlike judgments or adult judgments, that's incredibly painful. There's a big risk for you there. So why am I talking about motherhood and the complexity of our expectations versus reality? Well, as a teacher of compassion, someone who's thought a lot about compassion and self-compassion, I've realized that in many ways, learning self-compassion is actually about remothering yourself, learning to meet your own needs, learning to nurture yourself and to accept nurturing from others where perhaps you didn't have a blueprint for doing so. Maybe you're someone who finds it really difficult to accept compliments or care from someone else because it's just not familiar to you. The skills of compassion include turning towards yourself in a supportive way, being your own cheerleader, and recognizing when you're struggling and recognizing what you need. And in a way, that's healing that mother wound, because it's recognizing I didn't receive those things, but I can learn to do those things for myself. And what's interesting about learning to do that is that when you become more self-compassionate, you also start to recognize that your flaws are normal, that we all have imperfections. And in the process of understanding that about yourself, it becomes easier to understand and accept the imperfections of others. Now, there's an important and crucial point here that I want to make. Accepting the limitations of another person in terms of not fighting against reality, that acceptance that other people are imperfect and so are you, doesn't mean that you have to keep taking on behaviors that are harmful to you. You can accept that a person is the way that they are without spending time with them, without letting them treat you in a way that's harmful to you. So the word acceptance is complex here. Just as the word forgiveness doesn't mean that you just let down your barriers and let people treat you badly. So there's a subtle difference. Accepting what we can't accept. In other words, someone is the way that they are, whether it's yourself or someone else, is really important. Fighting reality is pointless. And at the same time, you can say, this relationship is hurtful. This person is unable to give me what I need, therefore I need to find it somewhere else. Or I can have a relationship with this person, but only with realistic expectations, rather than always seeking and hoping for something to happen that is not going to happen. So this step of acceptance is part of that remothering ourselves process. So I've shared quite a lot of information there. I really wanted to highlight the complexity of our beliefs around mothering, motherhood, mothering ourselves, and accepting support. And also beginning to help you to focus on the reality of what is and what you can begin to do for yourself, given that other people can't be that perfect mother figure in your life. There may be some grief involved in that process, and that's okay. That's completely understandable. But you can begin by starting with yourself, meeting your own needs gently, tenderly, with compassion. And that makes everything else just a little bit easier to deal with. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know your questions. And I look forward to sharing more with you again soon.